All right, friends, it's time to give you loyal listeners a discount on protein powder. You may or may not know, but I launched my very first protein powder 2 years ago. It's a grass-fed beef isolate with only 3 ingredients: grass-fed beef, either organic cacao or organic vanilla, and organic monk fruit. Now, if you don't want any of the added flavor and sweeteners, you can also just get unflavored. And no matter what flavor you choose, you're getting over 23 grams of protein per scoop, which is going to keep you full and satisfied between meals. I love starting my day with a Fab4 smoothie and breaking my fast with that much protein. It makes a serious difference in my cravings and blood sugar balance the rest of the day, and I've seen it with my clients as well. Now, I never thought I'd own a product company, but when I got pregnant with Sebastian, I realized the majority of protein powders were chemically extracted or enzymatically extracted, and I wanted to use heat and water only. I wanted minimal ingredients because we don't need those emulsifiers, fillers, or added vitamins, minerals, and probiotics. All of those additions increase the chances that it's not going to work for your body, whether it be bloating, digestion issues. I just wanted pure, clean protein to keep you full and satisfied so you could build the most delicious Fab4 smoothie. And I have to say, I'm pretty proud of the flavor. If you take a look at our reviews on Amazon, you'll see 5-star reviews for flavor. And that is key, because if you don't love your Fab4 smoothie and you don't love drinking your protein powder, you're not going to do it. It won't become a habit, and it's consistency that outpaces everything. So if you're here and you're listening and you want to give our protein powder a try, use the code podcast5 for $5 off your order. And let me know if you love it. My favorite ways to apply this protein powder is in my Fab4 smoothie, making freezer fudge, making chocolate milk, making hot chocolate, and throwing the unflavored into all my kids' baked goods. So let me know how you use it. Let me know if you love it, and share this podcast deal with your friends. Dr. Cindy Hovington is the founder of the Curious Neuron. It's an online resource that provides research-backed parenting advice to parents and caregivers. She's a mom of 3 and has a doctorate degree in neuroscience. She created the Curious Neuron blog and co-hosts the Curious Neuron podcast with another Be Well by Kelly podcast alum, Dr. Marianne Von Horn. Dr. Hovington lives in Montreal, Canada with her family, and I'm so excited to bring her on today's show to talk about school readiness skills, social emotional skills, screen time, brain development, tantrums, and everything parenting. Cindy, welcome to the show. It has been such a pleasure to follow you online and be connected to you. And I'm so thankful for you for spending the time with me today. I'm so excited about today's topics. And like I said before we got started, I feel like for most parents, they end up being passionate about whatever it is their career's in, or deep diving. For me, it's, science, nutrition, blood sugar, insulin, helping my clients. And then I had kids. I was like, wait a second, I need to make sure that I know what I'm doing when it comes to parenting. And there's so much out there. But I love that what you share on the Curious Neuron is backed by science and research. And that's why you're here. So thank you for being here.
Thanks so much for having me. I think we're going to have a great conversation, because like you said, it doesn't matter what our background's in. Eventually, when we become parents, we all have to figure that out. And that's what I'm there for.
I love it. And you're a neuroscientist. And can you tell me, a little bit about your background and how you ended up diving into the neuroscience around child development?
Yeah. So I was doing a PhD at McGill University here in Montreal, and I was studying schizophrenia and mental health. And you might think, like, what does that have to do with child development? But the aspect I was studying was cognitive development, because mental illness often starts in teens and in adolescence. So you're still developing at that age. Your frontal lobe is still developing, and there's still a lot going on in your brain. So I was studying emotions and cognitive skills and in mental health. And what happened is that I finished my doctorate degree, and then I went into education for my postdoc. And the reason why there was such a huge shift is because, again, they were teens. I was studying mostly young adults. And my mind was thinking, how are they learning in the classroom? How are they learning if we're seeing all these cognitive difficulties that they're having, verbal memory, memory skills, executive function issues, how are they learning, and how can we help them as they continue in their academic career? So I started my postdoc, but then I got pregnant and then I ended up staying home. And I had always been I always had the idea of staying home with my kids, and I decided to do it. And that's why I ended up in the end starting Curious Neuron. I was a parent now. And just like you said, as much as I loved studying schizophrenia and mental health, now I was interested in understanding cognitive development and emotions, but in something relevant to me, kids, toddlers, especially when my first was around the age of 2 or 2.5. I was like, what's going on? What is all this, these emotions? And so I decided to launch the blog for Curious Neuron. And then it just took off from there. I was summarizing research, and then I asked for people to jump on board with me. And now we're over 100 different contributors from around the world, whether it's researchers or clinicians. There's even a page on my website where you could look at different labs and see what research studies they're doing and if they need participants. So it's really my way to bring science to parents, because there's a lot that's relevant to us. And all this research happens behind these closed doors, and then scientists have their conference and we share it and we're excited. But what about us on the other side? What about the parents that would like to know, what do I do when my child has a tantrum? Or what do I do when I want to lose my cool? Like, there's research on that. So we should know about it. And that's what I'm here for.
I love it. It brings up something for me, which is that the majority of science comes out in research. It takes 19 years for us to implement it on the other side of seeing our clinician, right? The actual human who it will affect. Yeah. It takes 19 years from what's happening in a lab or happening in a study or after a meta-analysis is made for it actually to be people to be walking around on the street practicing what's come out in research. I am so thankful for you and for your blog and for the contributors to your blog, being able to distill that down, digest it, and make it easy for us. So what I want to do for our listeners today is make your blog even more digestible for anyone listening. So let's dive a little bit into that. I am at the stage where Sebastian is a little bit over. He's 2 years and 9 months old, and I'm definitely in the emotions. And so I'd like to kind of break down, and he goes to school in September. So he'll start preschool in September. And I'd love to break down some of the topics like school readiness, social emotional skills. How do we get through tantrums together? Are these emotions normal? Let's dive right in.
Yeah, I love that you said the word together, because it's exactly what we should be doing. I think the sort of misconception sometimes is I get emails from parents who have a 10-month-old or a 15-month-old, and they're like, what's happening? What did I do wrong? Why is my child screaming all of a sudden for whatever, it is? I'm bringing them in their high chair and they're mad and they're yelling and they're tossing themselves and arching their back and getting all stiff. And what's wrong? Where did I go wrong? Or what's wrong with my child? Is this normal? So this is a very common email that I receive. And my first response to parents is, take a breath. You didn't do anything wrong. This is very normal. And your child is learning how to regulate their emotions. And this is a skill. It's not something that just happens overnight. It takes time. It takes cognitive abilities. It takes development to move forward. So it'll take a little bit of time, but there's a lot that we can do as parents to guide our children. And like you said, we're in this together. So a child who's acting out, especially at a very young age, it's not a misbehavior. And I hope we can change the language one day around that, because if we look at it as communication, what are they trying to tell us? Because they don't have the words yet. They don't have the means of communicating yet. They might know some words, but feeling frustrated versus I'm mad or sad, or feeling disappointed because they can't have what they want, they'll go to their go-to way of doing it is crying and screaming and getting upset. But that's their way of saying, I'm super disappointed right now. So if we take a step back as a parent, also at that moment, take a step back and then regulate ourselves first, because that could be the hardest. If we've had a long day, if we haven't slept, if we have a baby at home and we have a toddler. I was in it twice. I have a 2, a 4, and a 6-year-old. So, I've seen it a few times. You don't regulate yourself as well as if you're rested and everything is good and you have help and your laundry's done and your meals are ready, right? It's very different. Or if you have a spat with a spouse or somebody or family member, your emotions are not the same. It's almost like you're ready to go. And then your child gets mad at something and then you're like, why? Stop it. But it's not towards them, it's towards that other person. So there's a lot that goes on in that moment. And I think that as parents, we have to kind of step back and look at our child in a way where there's empathy, right? There's an emotion. The same way that if we were to go to work and somebody's crying, we'd say, are you okay? What's wrong? Or we might know what's wrong and say, I know it sucks, that whatever happened before, I understand that you're upset about this. We should be approaching it the same way with our kids. We should say, I know you wanted the blue cup, and as crazy, as not as crazy, but like to us, that doesn't make sense. You asked for the blue cup, I gave you what you wanted, and now you're crying. But if we approach it the way that we would with friends and colleagues, we would say, I see that you're upset right now. I know that you're confused or you're frustrated because you wanted the yellow one, but the yellow one's in the dishwasher. Let's take a deep breath together. And if you do that tomorrow, it's not necessarily that they'll stop the tantrum, but slowly, when that's the mentality that we have around tantrums, they're going to start saying, hey, mom and dad see me, they get me, so that's the first part, is connecting with their kid and letting them know that they're seen, and we're there to guide them through these big emotions. Then the next step is teaching them skills. What is the difference between, feeling disappointed or frustrated or mad or sad? It's not just a black and white thing. It's not just mad or sad, but there's a lot of emotions in between. So if we can teach them what it means to be frustrated and to use those words when we're frustrated, when they're frustrating, and modeling it for them, then at some point they might understand, okay, when I'm frustrated, I do this, or when I'm mad, I do that. Screaming at this level is an emergency scream, right? So there's like a range. I had a chart for my kids. One was saying like, I'm so disappointed, using your words. 5 is screaming because you need to go to the emergency, like that. There's a range, but a lot of kids will go to 5 right away. I want a banana. No, you can't have it right now. 5. Yeah. And it's like, but there's so much in between. So we have to show them. There are charts online that we can look for. I forget the title exactly, but so there are skills that we can teach our kids, and we have to take the time to do that, because then they won't develop these emotion regulation skills. And there's a lot of research around that. They need us to guide them.
What is the research saying? I mean, I don't know necessarily that I was having these conversations with my parents in the same way that I'm having conversations with Sebastian. And maybe we were, but what is the research telling us? And what's some really interesting highlights that you really want listeners to know?
Yeah. To me, I was looking for, I remember at the beginning with my first child, I was like, okay, fine, give me a tip. Come on, studies. Let's find this golden nugget hidden in the research somewhere where it tells me like what to do with my child. And I started finding these meta-analyses and these summaries that all said the same thing. It's when a parent is responsive to their child's emotions. All of them. It always goes back to that. It doesn't matter if you have these studies that teach skills, about emotion regulation. If the parent is not responsive and sensitive to their child's emotions, it's the missing element in everything. And I think back to the way that I was raised. So there are different parenting styles. One is authoritarian, where it's like, what I say goes, I'm the parent, I'm not your friend, this is how it is, and you have no say. That is a sort of parenting style where it's all about rules. And I was raised in that environment. I was raised by a single mom. So she would always say like, I'm the mom and the dad. And I get it. It was a hard job, and I wasn't an easy child. And I had a brother who was younger, and we caused trouble. Yeah. So I think back and I totally get that. But what was the missing part was the connection, the saying, when you're upset, it's okay to have emotions. It's okay. I was never taught to be okay with those emotions. It was like, buck up and just like move on. And yeah, you're disappointed, but that's life, and that was the missing part for us, for me, when I grew up. And that's what we have to remember now. I think there's this sort of trend right now towards these positive parenting or attachment parenting, responsive parenting, that those titles aren't covered in research. It's called authoritative parenting. So I spoke about authoritarian, where it's all rules, but the other type, I keep mixing them up. Authoritarian is the rules, and authoritative is rules and connection and warmth with their child. So when we balance that and the child feels seen, but understands that you can't have a cookie before bedtime, there's the rule. But me saying, I know you're upset, you'll have one tomorrow, but not right now, it's bedtime, is showing them, okay, mommy's there for me. She gets it. She knows that I want one, but I can't have it. And it takes time. It's not just because we do tomorrow that they're going to be like, yeah, no problem, mom. It takes a bit of time for them to understand that that's the balance and how it works in our home. But yeah, that's the research.
I love it because you're still able to have those boundaries. And I'm much like you. When I do think about certain aspects of my childhood, it was like, if I did something wrong, I was put in timeout, or go to your room. And when you calm down, will come back out, or it's okay. Everything's okay. It's okay. It's okay. You're okay.
You're like crying.
It's okay. Yeah. And I think what that's really resonated for me, and just kind of the responsive parenting, or whatever online platform you're following along, to understand like how to communicate, is to not say like, it's okay. Like, you're upset. I would be upset too. Like, you know, kind of like acknowledging that their emotions, so they feel okay to have it.
Exactly. And being sent to a room or timeout. So timeout, there's a lot of conversation around that. You know, it's not bad for our kids to have a timeout. It's just that research shows that we don't do it. We're not consistent in the way that we do it. So then it doesn't work effectively. But that's a different conversation. But the whole go to your room and calm down, great. But what do I do with these emotions? I'm going to go sit and wait for the frustration or the anger or the sadness to go away. But is the anger or sadness okay? And you know, how do I express it? And what if I'm not comfortable with this emotion? Like, that's what we have to be. And it's so hard to be a guide for emotions for a child when we were never taught how to do that. So that's a big missing factor. And that's something that I had to think of and realize with my toddler, my first child. I realized that I had never been taught what to do with emotions. So even if I had studied everything and understood emotions and understood what to do with a child, I had never done it with my own. So how can I show them how to regulate themselves when I just want to yell because her yelling, or my other children screaming or yelling or being upset, is triggering me because I don't like that. I'm not comfortable with that emotion. So I always say, like, I take this holistic approach, I guess, to parenting. And I say that we have to first nurture ourselves, then nurture our children, and then nurture each other. That sense of community, feeling that you're not alone. All of that leads to that moment and how you respond during a tantrum, because you need all of that. If you are not well, or if you don't know what to do with your emotions, then you need guidance, because you'll struggle showing your child.
I think there are probably so many people that grew up sort of in our generation that are raising children with this same sort of like hurdle that we all need to get over, of just not saying that everything's okay, and like learning how to deal with our own emotions as well. So what advice do you have for parents who are tuning in that are like, that's probably me. I am uncomfortable with the screaming and the crying in a restaurant. I am uncomfortable with all the emotions coming out of my toddler because I don't want them to feel that way. But like, how do we grapple with that and really work on ourselves first? What advice do you have for parents?
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. I was speaking to somebody yesterday, the day before, and she was talking about her 2-year-old. She was saying he misbehaves a lot, but I don't mind it when it's in my home, but not when it's at my parents' house. And I asked the question, why do you mind it at your parents' house? Is it because you feel judged, or you feel that you're being looked at, or that you're doing something wrong, or you've done something wrong? And her response right away was, no, of course not. And then she sat with it for a second. She's like, oh yeah. And so first of all, that's the whole community part, right? We need to stop judging a parent when we see their child having a tantrum in a cart at the grocery store, because, it's part of their development. If only every single parent, and also parents and grandparents, remembered that we went through it too, because all of a sudden I feel that they think that never happened, right? Like parents and in-laws, they're like, oh,
you were never like that.
Yeah, you were never
like that. No. You were the perfect child.
Yeah, maybe we'll say the same thing later on. But right now, those comments don't help. And in that moment, as hard as it is, knowing that people are watching, or knowing, and you might want to lean towards like, stop crying, just stop crying. Just, there's no reason to cry right now. Stop crying. But what you want to say is, I've got you. I'm here.
Yeah.
I've got you. And if they want to cry and not be touched or hugged, give them space. Doesn't matter where you are, but be there. Just whether it's through eye contact or being close to them, just be there for them. And in your mind, if you do struggle with regulating yourself, that's a much bigger issue. And the first step is thinking about why. How were you parented? And you could see a therapist. I personally chose to see a therapist to work through that, because if we don't work through all of that, we won't get to the moment where we have a bit of more freedom in our mind, like saying like, okay, I've accepted certain things. I've moved past certain things. So either you need a therapist, and there's nothing wrong with that. Can we please normalize therapy as a preventative way? And there's nothing wrong with that. We see doctors, we go see mechanic for a car, we see therapists for our brain.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But
there's actually something really cool happening in LA. It's called OK Humans. You know, my friend Allie Webb does the dry bar. It's like blowouts. So now she's going to have like that kind of a service, a therapist where you can, where it's going to completely normalize it, where you're like, I'm going to go drop in and talk to someone for 45 minutes or an hour.
I love that. Can we Can I talk with her? That's amazing.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited for people who are, in the States or, you know, it could be just because there's just this, people think they're a failure if they need to like go seek help on something. But if you called it a life coach or a business coach or a mentor, you'd be like, oh, wow. Like really, she's, you know, she's really looking out for herself and she's got these big plans. But in the minute it's a therapist, it's like, oh yeah, she's seeing a therapist. And you're like, there should be absolutely no labels to that. And actually,
I've seen therapists a few times, and it's like,
me too.
For me, it was just it's a matter of saying, you know what, I'm struggling right now. I think I've lost control of everything in my life, and I'm mentally, you don't have to have a mental illness to go see a therapist. You could just say, I need guidance, and that's okay. And as parents, I think we need a lot of guidance. And, you know, and it should be like, here, you're leaving the hospital with your brand new baby. Here is your first appointment in about, 6 months or 4 months, because you need that support. And, anyways, but if we can just be attuned to ourselves, and if we're nurturing ourselves and every day we're thinking about, how am I doing today? Okay, I need to check in, and am I doing okay, or do I need help? Do I need to speak to somebody? I talk about self-care a lot with Curious Neuron, again, because we have to take care of ourselves. But self-care is not just about going to the spa. Personally, if I would go to the spa now, I would come home and my house would still be a disaster, and it would still drive me nuts. There's a lot more to it than that, So I call them these little dopamine boosts, where it could be a little something. Play a song that you like, not take away the baby songs for 5 minutes.
Turn Blippy off.
Yeah, exactly.
If I hear that guy coming through the car speakers again, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, exactly. But whatever it is, do something for yourself to say, I matter. Anything during your day. And for me, it's music, like playing whatever I feel like, old rock music. And my kids know all the words to all the Queen music, AC/DC. And it's because sometimes I'm like, okay, I'm struggling right now. There's that 3 to 4:30-ish time during the day. And there's no research that backs it up, but with my polls on Instagram, for some reason, it's always around that time where we're like, okay, the day's almost done, but we're struggling. So play some music or go out for a walk if you can, or food, give yourself, have a glass of water. Somebody told me that they had a reminder to drink water during the day, or prepare yourself a bowl of fruit, something that says, I care for myself and I matter, whether it's 5 minutes, 2 minutes, whatever it is. But I find that when you do that, then all of a sudden you're a bit better, your mentality is a little bit better, and then you can make it through the day. But so it's either little things to take care of yourself, or the big thing where you need to speak to somebody and get some support. But we have to take care of ourselves. We have to.
I love it.
That whole analogy, right, of the mask. We need to take care of ourselves.
Yeah, and it can't be all or nothing when you're a parent. I would say, like, Chris and I were trying to figure out how we could both get workouts in or work in, or like do these things around parenting, and your life just shifts so dramatically that it became something where I'd rather have a little bit of self-care time a little less often, but like guarantee it. Yeah. We actually do opposite mornings. It's like, I get my workout. Like, I got my workout this morning because it's a podcast day, but tomorrow he'll get to surf in the morning.
I love that.
And we're together, dinner times and stuff like that, and weekends, but we really prioritize each other in the morning and the weekdays, because with 2 kids, we hit the 6-month mark, and I was like, we're both going crazy, man.
Yeah.
And nobody has a long fuse, and we need to like figure out how to get this done. So that's so good. Tuning into yourself, seeking a therapist, finding ways for self-care, music. I mean, great advice for parents. Now, what do we do with our kids?
Like, we keep them in the house, or?
Yeah, no, I'm just teasing. But let's kind of circle back to the research on social emotional skills and tips for parents to help their kids regulate their emotions. And I'd love for you to touch on timeouts and why, when it would work, when it wouldn't work, and why we're kind of messing it up. Sounds like.
Yeah. I know. Well, I think so. I didn't have a chance to look back into the details of them, but it was saying how, from what I remember, it's just about how consistent you are. So a timeout is not, so remember that when you're putting the child to the side, you're not teaching them any skills. So as long as I think parent keeps that in mind, and what is your goal for a timeout? Is it because your child hit somebody or hurt someone? Then there's a reason to remove them from the situation. But if you're using timeouts because your child is mad, let's go back to that blue cup. They're upset that they got the blue cup and now they're mad, and you put them in a timeout. What you're showing them is when they express an emotion, they get removed from the situation rather than getting nurtured from you. So I think it's really important that we use timeouts wisely and use them in a time where you're showing them, I'm removing you from the situation because what happened here is dangerous for the person that you hurt and for yourself, showing them that you still see them, and putting them to the side and saying, I will be back and just give me a second. Now, the other issue is that when you do it very young, at a young age, they're not going to understand what's happening. So for them, through their eyes, you're just putting them to the side and you're not there for them. So I think I haven't found an age that they recommended for, but if a child is 3 or older, they'll have more of those language skills and they might understand, okay, mommy and daddy said they put me to the side because I scratched my sister or I pinched them or whatever it is, versus a 1.5-year-old being placed to the side and they're like, I don't understand what happened.
Why am I here?
Yeah, why am I here? And then they're just going to scream and cry more. Janet Lansbury has an interesting take on this. She talks about time in. So removing the child from the situation, again, because there was a danger. However, staying with a child who's very young and saying, you hurt so-and-so, and that is not acceptable in our home. So having those conversations, if we're just putting children off to the side and saying, you stay there and I'll come back in 3 minutes. First of all, 3 minutes is like 30 hours. It's too long. They don't understand that. And the concept of time is very difficult. I think I had seen a minute per age or something to that effect. But just to say, we need to think of their age and what we're trying to show them. So if we're showing them that wasn't safe, that's okay. But if we're showing them that emotions are not okay, that's a completely different situation. And it's not really the right way to go about it.
I love a time in. I'm into that.
Yeah.
And I think that when it comes to timeouts, it's safety is kind of where my brain goes. If we're like removing ourselves from the situation, if something is unsafe, is always like a great, just, I want to say it. Yeah. Like that's how you know that it feels right, is like not just because they're having an emotion.
Yeah. And even as adults, right? Sometimes we're like, I'm going to walk away because I'm really mad right now. And it's an okay way to regulate your emotions. You're just saying, I don't want to be in this moment right now. Not that you don't want to communicate something, but I need to step away, and that's fine.
Definitely. So let's talk about big emotions, tantrums. When are they happening? How often is normal? How do we handle it? Are there surges at certain points in their development, and why? Like, can we just unpack it all?
Yeah, let's go. So basically around the age of 1, your child, and I say around because it could be earlier for some kids and later for some kids, around the age of 12 months, you will notice that a child is crying and screaming more. Part of me wishes that we wouldn't use the word tantrum because it's associated to me to like terrible twos and all these negative kind of
terrible twos, teenager, like you're.
Oh, I never heard that one. That's really. Yeah. I heard another one of before, but anyway. But
I hate that language.
Right, and like, even saying like a child is a pest or a brat, I don't know. I personally don't like that because I don't say these things about my husband either. I talk with positive language and loving language. Even when I'm mad, they don't have to be called a name. And I don't want to do the same with my children. We should be treating kids the way we would treat any other human being. And they don't deserve to be called these names. So around that age, all these things are going to happen. All these emotions are happening. And it's because now they want to express themselves and their brain is developing and learning to become independent, and they want what they want, but they also don't understand what they want. So it's like a mixed bag of like all this stuff is happening in their brain. So we have to first understand that part of their development is that they're going to start to scream and cry. If we just look at it that way, as them communicating something to us. So if we're putting our baby in the car seat and they're crying and they're screaming, my kids went through that, all three of them.
Yeah.
And just today, when I came back, I had to try to help my 2-year-old because he's like, and if I took a step back and he was upset, he didn't want to go in his car seat. And I said, you were having a lot of fun outside of the park. And I understand, but we have to go back home now. I said, let's go look at the tree one more time. And he was having fun with the tree. And we went back to look at it. And then he settled in and went into his car seat. So again, when we step back and look at the emotions, we realize they're trying to communicate something to us. So around age 1, it'll begin. And there isn't really an age where it stops completely. They learn to continue to regulate their emotions until about kindergarten, but it could be a year or 2 more than that. So let's just use that as a range, but then by kindergarten, there are executive function skills that kick in as well. And that's part of regulating your emotions. You're able to shift your attention to other things. So, when you're disappointed about something, let's say a child takes a toy away from you, it's not just about saying like, I'm mad, but I'll stay calm. That's not emotion regulation. You could be mad, but the child's brain, when they're closer to 5 or 6 years old, might say, well, I really wanted that red truck. Okay, but Susie has it. So Susie, can I play with it later? Yeah. Okay, I'll use the blue truck. So those skills develop around that age. But at 2, they can't say that. They don't want to share. They don't want, they don't have those skills. So part of it is, giving them that vocabulary and those words by modeling it. But then as they get older, these executive function skills kick in. And we can build all those skills by playing certain games too with our kids. There are inhibition games. So inhibition is another cognitive skill that's developing in young children. And if you think of Simon Says, that game Simon Says, right? So if I say Simon Says, touch your nose, then you touch your nose. If I don't say Simon Says, you're not allowed to touch your nose. So that's inhibition. When I'm saying, Simon says, touch your cheek, Simon says, touch your nose, touch your forehead, and then you do it, you didn't inhibit that thought of now I have to not do it. So there are ways that we can do that with our kids. And in research, I think it's a night and day task, but I like doing this as a game. So they show a picture of night and day, and you have to say the opposite. When you see daytime, you say night. When you see nighttime, you say day. But I do it with random toys. So I might have a zebra and a giraffe behind my back. And I'll say, okay, guys, when I show you the zebra, you say giraffe. And then when I show you the giraffe, you say zebra. And we play those games. So those are all cognitive skills that a child is developing between the age of 1 and 5 or 6. And we have to nurture those skills. We have to create an environment where, if you say no to something and they really, 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 really want that cookie or that snack, and they've already had 300 snacks that morning, it's okay to say no and teach them to wait, because all of that will feed into that emotion regulation. So there's a lot to it. It's a huge cognitive ability, but it takes a lot of work. But if we're just aware of what it is, then we can provide little opportunities to say like, okay, let's play a game. Let's play freeze, right? During music, when you play music and when you stop it, you stop moving. You have to stop yourself. You have to, so that's another game that we can play with young kids. What's another one? Was it the chair? No, that's not yeah. So the freeze game with music, there's Simon Says, but that's for older kids. And then the opposite, I call it the opposite game, but it's called the night and day task. So there are little things that we can do in addition to telling them what their emotions are, modeling the emotions and allowing them to know what to do with them.
How does that wait? You called it a period to learning to wait. How does learning to wait or inhibition support their growth and development later in life?
Oh, delayed gratification. There's a lot of studies that are linked to success in life in general and also academic skills, because you raise your hand in class and the teacher says, wait, and you can either lose your mind and say, no, I want to speak now or whatever. We don't realize that those are the skills that we're developing in preschool. So a lot of parents will tell me, I want my 3-year-old to learn to read quickly, or I want them to write. And I tell them, don't forget about that. You don't have to focus on that, because they're going to learn those academic skills later. But what we need to work on now is that delayed gratification. One of them, executive function skills, creativity skills, thinking outside the box, critical thinking, right? So when my tower of blocks falls, what am I doing? How am I adjusting it? So playtime, all of this can be developed through play. And we've missed the mark somewhere because our society has made it seem that you have to have certain toys and certain kinds of toys that are going to lead to being smarter. I'm putting it in air quotes. These educational toys,
Right.
right? Like, and in the end, when a child is hanging out with you and you're sorting socks and you need to find matching socks, that's feeding into their academic skills later on. That's feeding into math. If you're having dinner and you ask them how many peas are left in their plate, like they're counting. You don't have to sit down at a desk to learn all of that. And these are all the skills that will help them not only in their academic skills, but then that'll feed into them as an adult, being able to regulate your emotions, emotion regulation. Children who have stronger emotion regulation skills develop stronger relationships because they're able to control their emotions when they're upset or disappointed and communicate. So that feeds into social skills as well. I don't like that you did that. That made me upset. All of that is developing when we're very young and before we start school. So there's a lot. I don't want parents to feel overwhelmed. Really, all a child is, everything that they're learning that's so important to them is when they're with us. If they're cooking with us, if they're learning to wait for dinner, right? They're learning that it's not ready when you snap, although I wish.
Yeah. Same.
Yeah. With 3 kids, I always have the image in my mind because they sit at the island and it's like birds, little baby birds in a nest. And they're just waiting for the food. Like, come on, is it ready yet? So, I know that we want a quick fix sometimes. And we think that buying certain toys or, buying all these educational toys at a young age, I see it in babies. They're buying everything. And I'm like, you could use a bowl and a wooden spoon from your kitchen and you're supporting your child's development. It's really simple. We really need to take a step back when it comes to playtime and understanding cognitive development and realizing that we're doing already so much in a child's environment that will help nurture them.
I love that so much. I love the examples that you're giving too. The freeze game, the opposite game, Simon Says, matching socks, how many peas are left on your plate. I mean, these are phenomenal ways to educate through life and also teach them to take care of themselves and learn how to cook for themselves and match their own socks and do their own laundry.
Yeah.
I think
how does that happen?
Yeah. So you mentioned a few other categories: creativity and executive function. Do you have any advice on how we can start to cultivate that in our kids?
Yeah. Creativity, again, we will join all these like courses. We go to classes, with parent groups or whatever it is. And they show us like a butterfly. That's the most beautiful thing. And they're like, here, have your child make this beautiful butterfly. And then your child just like stamps it and they're like, I'm done. And we're like, no, it has to look exactly like the teachers and look at the sparkles and look at how pretty and perfect it is. And we've forgotten that creativity, that there's no right or wrong when it comes to creativity, that it's about just allowing them to build whatever they want. Give them marshmallows if they don't eat them, and like toothpicks, if you have older kids, and give them a goal. Say like, build a tower as tall as you can or as big as you can. Give them paper cups and ask them to stack it and to build a castle. Creativity, I've shown parents, I have like this from the dollar store. It's like a serving tray where you could put the dip or something in the middle, and then there's the divisions all around it. Yeah. That is my most used toy in the house. I'll cut like small pieces of paper, and I'll put it at the center, and then I'll put hole punchers in one division. I'll put crayons in another. I'll put stickers and stamps in another one, and I'll hand it off to them. And you can do whatever you want, or I'll give them glue and buttons and googly eyes and pipe cleaners. There's no set of instructions. That is the kind of creativity that I've seen in research that leads to thinking outside the box, because you weren't told to stick to something and do that and make it perfect. You were just told to create. And we have to go back to that like simplicity of play, because that's what's feeding the brain. So that's the creativity part.
It's so beautiful to even like think about it and to think about your childhood and the time where you were able to imagine and create things and build things. And it wasn't like following the leader and this is the right way and that's the wrong way. It's just beautiful to think that you're harnessing just that childhood, like a child's innocence, and they're just so,
exactly.
they don't need to be told that this is right or wrong. It's just beautiful.
No, I know. And we're doing that a little bit too much, I find. I don't know what memories you have of your childhood when it comes to playtime, but I was raised at my grandparents' house. My mom would bring me there during the day. And my grandmother would basically say, go outside, see you later when it's lunchtime. And I would play in the backyard, and I would make like, I had a bucket and I had a spoon or whatever it was. And I would just put rocks and like soil and grass. And then I would pretend to feed an animal or something. Your imagination would go wild, and she would give me old face cloths and she would put up a string on her front porch with some clothespins, and I would wash it in a bowl of soap and water and then hang it. And it was the best game ever. And I do the same thing with my kids. I tied a rope in the backyard and they play pretend house, and they tie it, they wash it, they hang it to dry. But play was simple. And we had toys, but we didn't have tons of toys. And I don't even think my mom or my grandmother ever put thought into like, is this nurturing my child's development? Because we were let go. There was that freedom. And I think that now we're afraid of our children being bored. We're afraid of them not being entertained. So as soon as there's downtime, we feed that. We fill that downtime with something. We give them something to do, or we give them an iPad, or, and it's not that there's anything wrong if that's happening in little bouts, but if our child has never been bored and all of a sudden we're at the doctor's office and we have to wait, how will they respond, right? Like, are they able to sit there and look outside and look at the cars pass and wait, or look at people walking and just wait? And that's a skill. And I think that we're losing that. We're creating this sort of situation where we have to, like I said, like fill those gaps of downtime. So we can't be afraid of that. It's scary for us too, I think. Right? It's like, how's my child going to be?
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean, it just, the minute, I'm sure so many moms and whoever listening to this, if they have kids, are like, yes, I know what that feels like. You want to be like, what should we do? Should we, like, for me, I think I'll be like, Bash, you want to jump on the bike and go to the ecology center? We'll go to the farm, and I want to fill that time. Or like, should we go to the park and play? Or should we get your magnet tiles out and play? Like, I'm like trying to drive the play, but it's funny because at the end of the day, when I'm making dinner and Chris is like in the room and either helping me or like barbecuing or, watching baby T, that's when he self-plays the best.
Got it.
On his own, because it's like, we're all around and he has his toys and he's talking to himself and imagining and fully immersed in whatever his little imagination is doing. And sometimes Chris and I have like pointed it out to each other that like, why doesn't this happen all the time? And through this conversation, I think it's pretty obvious. Like, I'm worried about him not growing, not learning, like, and needing to fill those gaps. But my childhood was just like yours. Like, I used to take a piece of cardboard and slide down a pine needle hill, like a sled.
That's amazing.
And like, I remember, I literally remember turning a piece of cardboard into a sled, and there was a hill with pine trees, and it's very fast. It's scary. You get going quick. But I mean, that was the kind of like, what's Kelly doing over on that piece of cardboard?
That's amazing. But let's break that activity down for a second, just because free play in science and research is the best kind of play. And we forget that our children are masters of play. They were born ready to play. Because they're curious and they want to figure out how the world works. So when you were small, it's like, what can I do with this cardboard? What happens if I sit down on it, right? And then that risky play, that's another kind of play that we are slowly eliminating from our kids. And I get it. Look, right now with my 2, 4, and 6-year-old, it's risky play all day. It drives me crazy because I'm so scared that somebody gets hurt. Who's jumping off of this? Who's, challenging the other sibling? Like, how high can you, if we climb this slide, can you jump off? And my 4 and 6-year-old, they're strong, but my 2-year-old's following them. And he's like, yeah, what can I do? And it scares me. But that risky play, that speed, there are different kinds of risky play. And one of them is speed. One of them is jumping off of something high. I'm afraid of heights, so I don't even like seeing them do that. It scares me. But that's the kind of play that, let's say you were doing, back to your activity, your amazing activity, that there's so much growth in there because you're learning how to trust yourself. You're learning how to take risk. You're learning your boundaries, right? Like, this speed I'm comfortable at, but then this one, a little too fast, or whatever it is. Maybe you liked all of them, but just to say, you're developing a sense of self. You're developing the confidence. You're saying, you know what, when I'm in a situation, you, as a child and or in school, you're learning to trust yourself in making decisions. And all of that leads back to playtime. So, if we step back a little bit more and watch our kids take control, there's also a lot of research on scaffolding. So scaffolding is when we're giving certain steps to our child. So let's say a puzzle, you might introduce a puzzle to your child and they've never made one. So what are the steps that you take as a parent? What's the guidance that you give them in order for them to make it? So you don't make it completely and show them. First, it's like, okay, this is a puzzle, let's make it together and then take it apart. And then the next step is, let's find colors. Now we're going to do it again together, a couple days later. Let's find colors that match. And then we take it apart. And then the next step is, can you find the colors that match? And then we take it apart. And a couple days later, it's, okay, let me see what you can do. And, so there are steps to learning something. And, whether it's us doing it alone or parents whether it's our kids, playing on their own, or if we're there, we could be guiding them, but we shouldn't be taking control of the situation. We got to really trust them. They'll make mistakes. The tower will fall. But if we build the block tower for them, they'll never understand that so there are actually studies on this, like the speed of how a child places the block and removes their hand. That's going to help the tower stay. So they have to not just understand that if they don't place it straight, if they don't place one block on top of the other in a straight tower, that it's going to fall. But they also have to understand that there's a speed of how they let go of the block. And see, everybody's listening now tomorrow when they're going to be building a block of towers with their kids. They're going to realize, I have to let it go at a certain speed. But just to say, there's so much learning, and we can guide them, but we can't control play. It's their job. They've got it. Yeah.
Well, first of all, I love the risky play because I mean, as you know, like speed demon down the Pine Needle Hill on a piece of cardboard. And I had a trampoline in my backyard with none of this. Like, I have a neighbor who is amazing, and they have a cool trampoline, but it like fully has the net around it with the noodles, like the foam noodles on the bars of the net. Like it is fully locked and loaded. It is covered in styrofoam and bubble wrap. And that is awesome because as a parent, I'm like, I named my son Sebastian. We nicknamed him Bash. We've been to the ER 3 times and he's 2.5. We've had a broken arm. We've bit through our lip. We slammed our teeth back into the top of the roof of our mouth. We were afraid we were losing both front teeth, so like it is so scary. My husband's very afraid of heights, and he calls himself the safety officer of our house. And he's always saying, be careful. And now I'm always saying, be careful. And I'm now, because Bash has had some bashes, I'm now a little bit afraid of it, but I need to hear this from you. Like, I need to hear, don't be careful. I need to hear that the risky play is what's going to make him not be afraid to take risks, because I do think that has played out in my adulthood, like going out on my own, starting my own business, like coming out with a product, like all of these risks that I've taken, even as an adult, where my parents said, do not take these risks. I took them anyways. I did have the freedom to jump off my trampoline into the pool. There was no net around it.
Oh, nice.
Like I am an adrenaline junkie. Like I had the ability to do those things and have those risks. So as parents, like, how do we stop telling them not to jump off the wall and climb the tree? And
it's so hard. And I like that you mentioned how you and your husband work together for this, because for me in our home, it's the opposite. I don't like risk. I don't like seeing them do something that might hurt them in the end. And my husband's just like, how high can I throw you? Or what can you jump off of? And I love that because we balance each other. What I've done is kind of take a step back. So I'll go to the park, for example, and you have those bleachers, and I'll say, okay, which step do you want to jump off of? Because that's my own boundary. I'm comfortable with that. Now they jump from the top, and it's so scary, but they made their way. It took like 2 summers. One summer they made it like halfway up the bleacher. And then the second summer they kept going higher and higher. And it was also me working through it. So I'd be like, yeah, that's high enough. And they were like, can I jump higher? And I was like, no, not for today. And you're allowed to have boundaries too. And also when I post about risky play, I just want to say that I get emails, lots of DMs saying that like I'm pro hurting kids. And I just want to put it out there that there's a lot of judgment, so even a parent reached out to me and said she enjoys risky play, but she'll be judged at the park when her kid is climbing much higher than the other ones. And I want to bring that up because it's another thing that we have to kind of not normalize, but it goes back to community. Just let people do what they have to do. Let parents do what they feel best doing. There's no need to judge. If a child is comfortable and if the parent is comfortable with the type of risky play, good for you. Amazing. I think it's great. I'm still learning how to do it, so I hand it off to my husband to do all that kind of risky play. But yeah, speak to your spouse or your partner and try to figure out who's the one who's more comfortable with it, and then let them take the lead for that. I'm more of the I create activities, and my husband's like, let's go outside and play the park. So we have our own thing, and for my own kind of way of developing this, it's more of, okay, what kind of risky play am I comfortable with? Now, like I said, there are many different kinds. There's speed, heights, being lost. So let's say you're walking on the street, allowing you don't technically get lost, but that risk of getting lost where you let them walk further, like in front of you, or if you're in the forest and you're on a hike, letting your child walk a little bit in front of you, that's a type of risky play. So there are different kinds of things that we can do. And it's just about figuring out, like, what are you most comfortable with? Playing with water, can be a risky play in a pool. So you have to do what feels best for you and then figure it out with your partner as well.
Yeah. Well, maybe we'll take the approach of you and your husband, and because Chris is pretty structured and we do a lot of word of the day. That's always something that we do, a word of the day every day. And Chris will put it up. We have these flashcards that are letters that we use for alphabet stuff when Bash is little, but he'll throw a word of the day up and then kind of bring it up throughout the day.
I love that.
And so it's a little bit more structured in that regard. He grew up with teachers as parents, and he's brilliant. And I was the group project B+ kid, but I love that you're breaking this down: speed, heights, fear of getting lost, and water. I definitely can take the kids and go get our risky play on, if you will.
Exactly. We don't all have to be comfortable with it.
Yeah, definitely. So I there's so much that I want to unpack with you, and I know we've gone so long already. But let's jump into screen time, because I think that's really important, especially now coming out of the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I know what we were talking about earlier is the uncomfortable factor of a kid having a tantrum in public or being bored in public. And they're just don't be bored. Here's a phone in the doctor's office. Here's a phone at dinner at the restaurant. Here's the iPad. Here's, it's a pacifier basically.
Yeah.
So what is the research telling us when it comes to screen time and what's acceptable for kids? Have we seen anything come out in regards to the negatives or positives of it?
Somebody who's listening to this, and I don't want to scare parents. I don't want to, so technically you shouldn't have any screen time before the age of 18 months or 2 years old. Depends on the studies that you look at. But then a parent might say oh no, my child's 18 months and they've been watching TV and they've been having screen time since they were young. It's not too late to stop or to
don't shoot them. We're not here to shoot the messenger. We're not going to
just the recommendation.
This is just, but also we can't make informed decisions if we don't have the information.
Exactly.
And so that's what this podcast is about. I had a pediatric dentist on here tell me that because Bash has a pacifier, that the palate of his mouth is not developing in the right way and it can affect his breathing later. And I'm that's enough science for me to really pull back and have an end date. So that's why you're here. We're not here to shoot the messenger.
Yeah. And that is the whole point of Curious Neuron too. I just take the research and I put it out there. So just to say, for screen time, no screen time before the age of 18 months. And that doesn't include anything like FaceTime or Skype or Zoom. And the reason why, I don't know if you watched because I'll get rebuttals sometimes of parents saying I watched a lot of TV and I'm 37 or 38 and I'm fine. That's not the point. The point is that screen time has changed a lot today. There's not just Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood and Mr. Dress Up and Fred Penner. I don't know if you watched those.
Mr. Rogers for sure.
And Sesame Street, those were the TV shows that we watched. And we also went outside and we also had a lot of free play. So the life in general has changed a lot for a child. So if we take that into consideration and think about how much screen time they're having, it's not a good thing. It's a bit too much. And the problem is that if we think back to Mr. Rogers, it's not, the TV shows are not the same. They're faster. Think about when you're going out for a walk at night, let's say, and you see somebody watching TV in their living room. You can see the flashes of lights, right? So it's flashing different colors. That is how every time a scene changes, you have a flash of light. That is the problem. It's flashing so fast for young kids and their brain, especially the first 1,000 days. So first 1,000 days is from the moment of conception until their second birthday, which is part of the reason why they don't want screen time before the age of 2, because the neurons, the brain cells, are developing faster than they ever will. That is their go time to build, their brain and the architecture of their brain. So if they're watching something that's overstimulating, then that's really fast for their brain. And what studies are showing is that if they're watching too much TV before the age of 3 years, by 7 years old, they're seeing attentional difficulties. Now, as somebody with, research background and neuroscientist, I also have to say that this research is relatively new. So it's not saying that just because, and so it's new, and also their correlation. So they're saying that there's a higher chance of your child having attention issues, not necessarily ADHD, just attention is a skill. It's a cognitive skill. So they're saying that they're seeing more issues with this cognitive skill when they're 7 or 8 years old, if there was too much screen time. And too much is also, as of the age of 18 months, they say about half an hour to an hour of daily watching is okay. Slower paced, which is an educational show or a high quality TV show, is not necessarily one that sings or has alphabets. It's when you look at it from a brain perspective, it's something that's slower. So look at your child's TV show and try to see, like, every time there's a scene change. So if like a dog or an animal comes in, it's like, oh, hi, or a train, whatever show. It's like, hi, my name is blah, 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 and here's my friend, and there's that. And then you see the scene changes and you keep seeing the flashes of light. That's fast. It's fast for a child. Think about even for a baby. When we speak to a baby, we don't say like, hi, how are you? How was your day today? And what are you doing tomorrow? It's, hey, hi, you want to see mommy? Hi. Like, we slow things down, and that's what their brain is taking in, not something fast. So with older kids, research shows that when they have 2 or more hours, and older kids is 2 years old and over, 2 to 5 years old, 2 hours or more per day, every single day, is considered excessive, and that's when there are issues. There can be sleeping issues, there can be weight issues because they're more sedentary, there could be behavioral issues, more tantrums. The way that I approach everything in parenting is to step back and to journal a little bit, like to write some notes. When am I using screen time in my home? Is it when I'm tired, or, is it when I'm preparing a meal? Is it when we're in the car? Is it when we're out at family members' houses? When am I using screen time? And then make a list. What are my negotiables and what are my non-negotiables? So non-negotiables, for example, could be for you or for anybody. It's different. It could be when I'm preparing dinner. I need to get dinner done, and my 2.5-year-old does not sit down yet, and they're still young. That's when I use my little half hour of TV time, and that works for me in my home. Fine. Or you could say in the morning, I just need to, get laundry done one day, or I need to prepare to get to work. That's when I'm going to use a half hour in the morning and a half hour at night. It's okay to have that sort of schedule in your home. But if you're just using any downtime for screen time, then I would suggest that it's time to step back and say, okay, let me reevaluate what's going on in my home. Do I have screen time boundaries, right? Because it's nice to tell our kid, you can't stop asking for the iPad, or stop using my phone, or stop asking for TV. But then we're always on our phones, right? So what are the boundaries in your home? There are, I think you could search screen time family plans or media family plans. That's what, if you Google media family plan, then you could find like PDFs that you could print out and say, here are the rules in our home. These are my rules as an adult. Those are your rules as a child. And let's work together to have healthy screen time habits in our home. And I know also what's hard for parents, especially with young kids, is when a child doesn't understand the transition yet. So, you're watching TV and then your parent says, turn it off. And it's like, what? Hold on a second. I was watching that and it's fun and I want another one. Or, that stopping it or transitioning is very hard. So you can print something out. I use a traffic light in my home where we print out I have a big traffic light, and it's like, okay, we're going to start screen time. I put a clothespin on the green light. That means go, let's watch TV. When I say, okay, there are 5 minutes left, the clothespin is moved to the yellow light. And then I turn it, when I put it up, I'll say, okay, that's it, guys. I'm putting it on the red light now. They already knew that the time up was coming. It was almost time to end. So there's less of a fight to say like, I don't want to do this. And also with young kids, it really helps when they know what's coming up next. So it's not just, now it's your half hour screen time and you do the green light, yellow light, red light. It's also when screen time is over today, we're going to paint, or we're going to go to the park, or we're going for a bike ride. So now it's not just screen time is over, but now they're excited for the next thing that's coming. So really being mindful of that in your home. There's a lot that we can do. And I know that kids had a lot of screen time this past year, but now it's summertime. Let's try to get them outside as much as possible. Let's get them moving, and also have a schedule in our house where you intentionally turn the TV off or take the iPad away and say like, let's do something together.
I love that. I mean, I grew up where I was only allowed to watch television on the weekends until I was like in high school. And I think in high school, I really wasn't allowed to watch TV until it was like the TGIF was like a big deal because I got to watch like TGIF.
Yeah. They didn't even have a TV in their house until he was a teen. Wow. And
so I love that. And I definitely wanted that for our kids too. But, Sebastian started watching cartoons. He was about 2 years old and it was during the pandemic, but it's only on weekends. And then when Tashin was born, I was like, wait, how are we, how are we? So it's like a thing where Tashin goes down for his first nap at 9 a.m. or 8 a.m., depending on what time he wakes up on Saturday and Sundays. And that's Bash's 45 minutes of screen time on Saturdays and Sundays. And I can only imagine like as kids get older and want their own, phones and their own iPads and like, it's definitely, it's like, I can see how it could be a really slippery slope. And it's hard to have boundaries with kids because the transitions suck. Like you said, like you never want to see your kid cry when you turn it off. And I was told once that, telling your kids a little bit about what's going on is really calming to their nervous system. And they like to be in the know and in the mix is what we call it. So at the end of each day, and I don't know if this is like helpful or harmful, I was going to ask you this is Bash asked me, he says, tell me about the day. Let's talk about the day. Every time I put him in script, let's talk about the day. So we like go through the entire day of what we did. Like, what did you have for breakfast? And then what did we do? And where did we go? And who'd you play with? And who'd you see? And we talk about the entire day. And if there's anything that like didn't go right, like he maybe pulled a toy from his brother or like was upset about something, we'll talk about that again. Like why, like how we were feeling about it. And
that's amazing. And that's very good for social emotional skills as well.
Yeah. I don't know. It's just someone said like kids have less anxiety when they know what's going on. So I was like, well, let's make sure he doesn't have to deal with this. And then he asked me, and then we go from there into, well, what's happening tomorrow? And I tell him like what I do know that's going to happen. Like I know that grandma's coming to play. It's Wednesday morning. Mom tapes podcasts on Wednesdays. Jamma is her name. Jamma's coming to play and help daddy. And, and if I know something else is happening, I'll say it, but I'll say, we can do whatever we want, or, at this time, mommy can play and I give him the heads up. But I would love to know, like, I got that tidbit of information and I ran with it real hard. I can't tell. I went all in, but now I'm like, is that going to make it harder for him if the day doesn't go the way it was planned? Or like, is that good? What does the research say about that?
No, I don't know of any studies, but in general, that's very good because think about us too. We'll glance at our agenda, to see what's coming up the next day. And again, it goes back to what I said at the beginning. We just need to treat our kids like humans. Like it helps to know what's coming up. Same thing with a baby. Like some parents will tell me, my baby cries a lot when they're playing and I try to put them into their high chair and they don't want to. But did you let them know that playtime was over and then you were going to lift them up and put them in the high chair? If you and I were sitting having coffee and somebody lifted one of us and changed us chair, I'd probably, get mad or scream and kick. It's like, leave me alone. Like, what are you doing? So we have to really approach it that way. So I think it's really a beautiful sort of thing that you've started with your son, because now there's that trust factor too. It's like, and that safety factor. I know what's happening. There's that communication of what happened today in certain situations. During the pandemic, a lot of parents were worried about social skills with their kids. If kids are at home, how are they going to develop social skills? But with kids that are 5 and under, we are their social skills,
Yeah.
and social emotional skills are work together. So going back and saying like, this happened and how did you feel about that? You're developing exactly that, those social emotional skills. And there's a lot of learning that happens when you go back and think about a situation. We do it too, right? If we had an argument or something, or we had a discussion with somebody, we might think about it at the end of the day, and think about how it made us feel, or how we might have made the person feel. So I think that's really just a beautiful thing that you started. And yeah, I think I'm going to do it too. I think, yeah, it's really great.
How do you do it with 3 though?
Yeah, that I don't know.
Yeah.
Bedtime is a whole episode with 3 kids. Oh, geez.
Yeah, I can only imagine, like whack-a-mole. Like old game.
Yeah. Go to bed.
Yeah.
Get back in bed.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well, before we go, because I am coming up on a preschool, I'm curious, how do we get kids ready for school? I mean, I know you touched on the fact that it shouldn't be flashcards and practicing math and cramming for getting into school, and play is everything. So I'm going to actually probably go back and listen to this episode again, because I found it so valuable.
Thank you.
But is there anything we should be doing to get them ready, prepare them for like big changes? And it might not be school. It might be a little brother. It may be a little sister. It may be a moving houses. Like, what does the science tell us on like big changes and how we can prepare our kids?
Yeah, there are studies that talk about transitioning into either daycare with young kids or preschool with older kids. And the transition part is a big thing. So, there's attachment science that shows when babies are small and we hold them or we have eye contact with them, we're releasing hormones that are making us feel attached to each other and connected to each other. And in some parents, that takes a while to happen. I just want to point that out as well, because maybe somebody's listening and feels that they haven't developed that attachment yet. Sometimes it takes time. But in general, our child, I think the book, The Power of Showing Up, highlights this beautifully, right? So a child has to feel secure. And so they talk about the 4 S's. So the child wants to feel attached or secure. And in order for that to happen, they have to feel seen, soothed, and safe. Those 3 S's. Honestly, I go back to that all the time, because it really summarizes everything that you see in research. When a child will start preschool, they were feeling seen, soothed, and safe with you. So they've developed an attachment with you. But now they have a new person in their life, a new caregiver that they'll be spending all of their days with, every day and a good chunk of it. They're going to have to develop the same attachment with that person. So as much as possible for this transition before it happens, according to the studies, we should be present with the child, with the new caregiver. But I know that it's not possible, especially now with COVID. So what I suggest to parents is, can you bring that person into your home without physically having them in your home? Can you start talking about their new teacher or their new caregiver if it's a daycare? Can you get a picture of them? Can you bring them up in conversations and say, oh, I wonder what, I don't know why I keep thinking of Susie today. I wonder what Susie, your new teacher, I wonder if she has a dog, or we're eating supper and we're eating, I don't know, pasta. I wonder if she likes spaghetti too, just like you do. When you start in 2 weeks, we can ask her, the next day you're playing ball or at the park, maybe you'll be going to the park with Susie, or you can play ball. I know that you like it and she might like it too. So bring them into your home as much as possible, because your child will start feeling their connection with them, knowing that you are connected with them. You are their safe person. So if you could show them this person is okay, then the transition will be just a little bit better. And if you could be with that person, if it's a nanny, some people have asked like if that's okay. And yes, if you can be present, it's even better. But if you can't, look for ways. Can you Zoom with this person just once? I wish all preschool centers and daycare centers had this as part of their transition, because I know here, I'm from Montreal in Canada, and I know that it's part of some private daycares and preschools, but not all, where they allow the parent inside the school, even before COVID, and had a slow transition. So, 1 or 2 hours with the new educator and the parent, and then 3 to 4 hours, and then half a day, and then a full day once a week. Or that is a very slow transition that allows a child to develop that bond, because there is a stress level that happens when a child is brought into a new center with a new educator. And the best way to calm it down is for them to be connected to their new educator. So it's also the role when we're looking for a preschool or a daycare, it's also the role of that educator to nurture your child. It's very important, that what we spoke about today, that, during tantrums, that it's not a moment of discipline, that it's not a timeout. It's important that they nurture them the same way that you would, that they see their feelings, that they help them feel seen and soothed and safe, because the studies have shown that as the child develops this kind of attachment, their cortisol levels or their stress levels go down. So that's the kind of transition that I wish happened everywhere, but as much as possible, bring that person into your home without them being physically there.
I love it. That's so good. I mean, it makes perfect sense too. If they're feeling a secure attachment to you and they feel safe with you and soothed by you, just your presence alone can keep them feeling that way.
Yes,
makes perfect
exactly.
sense.
Yeah. I know that if a child is nervous and gets anxious around these sort of transitions, through play, we need to reenact it and say like, hey, you're starting preschool in 2 weeks. Let's take the pink bear and the yellow bear. Pink bear is the teacher and yellow bear is you. And you can start playing every day and say like, how is yellow bear feeling today? And, they might not say anything, but you might say, I don't know who you are. Hi teacher. Hi, Susie. What are we playing today? And Susie might say, oh, we're going to play ball. You want to speak to a friend? And Purple Bear is sitting by himself. Hi, Purple Bear. My name is Yellow Bear. We reenact different kinds of situations that they would experience in preschool, so that when it comes to that morning, or we could reenact the morning of going to the preschool for the first time, and Yellow Bear and Yellow Bear's in the car with his mommy or daddy, and they're driving to the preschool, and Yellow Bear says, I'm feeling nervous. And when I'm nervous, my heart feels like it's pounding a little bit more, and my tummy hurts, expressing all of that. And then your child, might say in the car, like, remember Yellow Bear, his tummy was hurting. Well, my tummy hurts too. And you might say, that means you're a little nervous, and that's okay. This is a new situation. And, you haven't met Susie. We've been talking about her for 2 weeks, but this will be the first time you meet her. Let's do what we practiced. I tell my kids, when you're nervous around somebody, we say, hi, nice to meet you. My name is, and that's kind of like the icebreaker. And you say like, oh, what do you like to play with? And I do too, because I'm an introvert. So my way of like getting to know somebody is like, oh, asking questions and like seeing what we have in common, so that I could find a common ground and be a little less nervous. and I taught my kids to do the same. So we can give them all these skills and help them with those transitions.
I love it. I love it so much. You're an amazing neuroscientist, but an even more amazing mom, and such a great resource for all of us. I just can't thank you enough for spending the time with me today, Cindy. I feel like I learned so much, and I feel more prepared for 2.5, because these little people just need our love and understanding. Yeah. And people like you are helping all of us new parents figure it out. So thank you.
Thank you, Kelly.
This was awesome. Where can people follow along? Where can they learn more?
They can go to curiousneuron.com. I have a podcast too, the Curious Neuron podcast. I interview researchers and clinicians, and we talk about child development and parenting as a whole. And you can follow me on Instagram at curious_neuron. And on our website, you can read blog posts, and you can also, like I said, connect with labs across North America, because sometimes, there are studies that could be helpful. There are studies for women who are pregnant and nutrition and so on. And it's great to be part of these studies and get to know ourselves and our children more free. It's part of, and we contribute to science. So we've got a lot going on our website, and, there are PDFs too. If somebody wants to work on themselves, I have the Better Me, Better Parent ebook, where you work through the first chapter. A parent had told me that it made them cry. And that wasn't my intention, but it talks about what's important to you and what did you enjoy doing, what brought you joy before having kids. And, that's for me the first step when you're working on yourself, because we might have forgotten that. And then working through how we were parented, and then working on, with studies that I found, building our child and parent relationships. So there's a lot that we can do. And everything that I put out there is always backed by science.
I love it. We're going to link that ebook in the show notes, along with your website, your podcast, and your Instagram. Thank you so much, Cindy. Today was awesome.
It was. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Be Well by Kelly. Please subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Learn more at bewellbykelly.com and follow me on Instagram at bewellbykelly. I would love if you picked up my books, Body Love and Body Love Every Day. They're sold on Amazon and at all major booksellers.